Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Today we're going to discuss Ki Tavo, when you come. And it's Deuteronomy 26:1 through 29:8. Ki Tavo was a very powerful Parashah. And of course, we can't talk about the whole thing, so we will grab the little pearls that Hashem throws at us. And I, as always, my disclaimer, read Hashem's word, because the Torah is living and breathing, and it will speak to your life at that very moment that you're in that very environment that you're in whatever storm or situation that you're in. So what I'm going to talk about today is how Ki Tavo spoke to me and to my heart. Ki Tavo, when you enter, introduces bikurim, first fruits. And many rabbis believe that this applies to the 7 species that are unique to Israel. They're spoken about in Deuteronomy 8. It talks about the wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranate, olives, and date honey. And while this mitzvot is applicable when you're in the land of Israel and fulfilled perhaps once a year, there is no doubt that we're to give Hashem the first fruits of all that He gives us. And those things that are first are usually the most precious to a person. When we give Hashem the first, we're affirming that He is our God and we love Him most. We're acknowledging that all comes from Him. Hashem knows our character better than we do. And He knows that when a man thrives and has abundance, he often becomes conceited and will forget that it is only through Hashem's loving kindness and generosity that we have prospered. But Ki Tavo is also talking about commitment to a covenant relationship, a partnership, the binding of a people to their God. This Parashah teaches us that we are to remember who our ancestors were, the poverty and affliction that they endured, and how Hashem went before them like a devouring fire. Bnei Israel were no longer slaves in Egypt, and this redemption didn't come from the might of their swords. They are now Hashem's chosen people, entering the land that Hashem promised their ancestors. When Bnei Israel was in Egypt, and even as they were let out and redeemed from bondage, they held on to this identity, the identity given to them by their oppressors in Egypt. And this reminded me of something that I read, that it's mentioned, you probably could find it all over the internet. I read it in Africa Storybook. It's a small story, and while I was not able to conclusively confirm its authenticity, it's the message that reminded me that what we believe can greatly limit our capacity to live up to our God-given identity. And we all know that God gives us an identity. He gives us a name. Even if our parents do not, He does. So the story goes like this. It's a man, he was walking by elephants at a circus, and he suddenly stopped. He was confused by the fact that the huge creatures were being held by a small rope tied to their front leg. There weren't any chains and there weren't any cages. It was obvious that the elephants could at any time break away from their bonds, but for some reason they did not. So he saw a trainer nearby, and he asked why the elephants just stood there and made no attempt to get away. The trainer explained that while in captivity, baby elephants were traditionally trained by tying one of their front legs to a stake to the ground. Because the elephants were small, only a thin rope was required. And they struggled and pulled at first, but as they felt the pain that the rope caused, they would stop pulling. They would give up. Elephants grow fast, and before long, those cute little babies were giants. But because they were conditioned to believe that they could not break free, that same thin rope is all that's needed to keep them secured. And I think that this message is powerful, because I believe that we can oftentimes fall into that same category where we believe that the world, our situation, our storm can be that rope that holds us there and tells us, no, you're only as good as this situation, as this moment. And the reality is that we read in Parashah Ki Tavo that Hashem is breaking that rope. He's breaking those chains, and he's telling his people that they are who he says they are. And this goes to us as well. We are who he says we are. The passage that most speaks to me and confirms this is that you have affirmed this day. This is Deuteronomy 26:17 through 19. It says, you have affirmed this day that Hashem is your God, in whose ways you will walk, whose laws and commandments and rules you will observe, and whom you will obey. And Hashem has affirmed this day that you are, as promised, God's treasured people, who shall observe all the divine commandments, and that Hashem will set you in fame and renown and glory high above all nations that God has made, and that you shall be a promised, a holy people to your God, Hashem. Bnei Israel chose in this moment to exclusively devote themselves to Hashem, and Hashem chose Bnei Israel as his treasured people, and we entered into covenant. We must remember that covenant relationships take commitment, they take work, they take devotion. And one of the ways that we nourish a covenant relationship and guard our ways is by remembering. Seems like a simple thing, by remembering. And there are several major historical events that Torah tells us to remember. I'll mention a few. Our exodus from Egypt, the revelation on Mount Sinai, Amalek. Says, remember what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt. The golden calf. Remember, do not forget how you angered the Lord your God in the desert. Are we angering the Lord our God in our desert? Because each of us will walk through a desert eventually. Whether it's a desert, whether it's the valley of the shadow of death, we will be there. Are we forgetting Hashem? Lashon Hora, and we remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam on the way when you went out of Egypt. And Shabbat, can't forget the Shabbat. It said, remember the Shabbat day to sanctify it. But what happens if we don't remember? What's the big deal? What happens if we don't remember? When we do not remember, we grow apart, we stray, we begin to forge relationships separate from Hashem. We forget who Hashem is. We forget his character. And as a result, we do not teach our children about Hashem because sadly he becomes unknown and foreign to us. And pretty soon Hashem becomes a stranger to our children, our children's children. I want to talk about something that I read a few years ago, and you could find it in a book called Ancient Near East Texts Related to the Old Testament. It's edited by James B. Pritchard. And we find in this a prayer. It's dated approximately 668 through 633 BCE, and the text is written in the Sumerian dialect of Emesal, and you'll find it has an interlineal Akkadian translation. The prayer is addressed to no particular God, but to all gods in general, gods, little g, even those who may be unknown. The purpose of the prayer seems to be to claim relief from suffering, which the writer understands is the result of breaking a divine law. He claims that his transgressions have been a result of ignorance, and that he does not even know what God he may have offended, and he claims that he should not be singled out for punishment. I do not pray this prayer. I am reading it simply for purposes of making a point. And the reason why, and I modified it slightly because it is very impactful, but it's also very long. This prayer is the prayer to every God. And I will repeat, I do not share in this. This is just reading it. Even reading it made me a little antsy, but I think it's important that we hear this. The prayer goes as follows. May the fury of my Lord's heart be quieted toward me. May the God or goddess whom I know or do not know be quieted toward me. May the God or goddess who has become angry with me be quieted toward me. In ignorance I have eaten that forbidden of my God. In ignorance I have set foot on that prohibited by my goddess. O Lord, my transgressions are many. Great are my sins. O God or goddess whom I know or do not know, my transgressions are many. Great are my sins. The transgressions that I have committed, indeed I do not know. The sin that I have done, indeed I do not know. The forbidden thing that I have eaten, indeed I do not know. The forbidden place on which I have set foot, indeed I do not know. The Lord in anger of his heart looked at me. The God in rage of his heart confronted me. When the goddess was angry with me, she made me become ill. The God whom I know or do not know has oppressed me. The goddess whom I know or do not know has placed suffering upon me. Although I am constantly looking for help, no one takes me by the hand. When I weep, they do not come to my side. I utter laments, but no one hears me. I am troubled, I am overwhelmed. I cannot see. Ever inclined to me, I kiss the feet of my goddess. I crawl before you. How long, O my goddess, whom I know or do not know, before your hostile heart will be quieted? Man is dumb, he knows nothing. Whether he's committing a sin or doing good, he does not even know. O my Lord, do not cast your servant down. He is plunged into the waters of a swamp. Take him by the hand. The sin that I have done, turn into goodness. The transgression that I have committed, let the wind carry away. My many misdeeds strip off like a garment. O God or goddess, whom I know or do not know, my transgressions are 7 times 7. Remove my transgressions. Remove my transgressions, and I will sing your praise. May your heart, like the heart of a real mother, be quieted toward me. Like a real mother and a real father, may it be quieted toward me. That's on page 391 through 392. I wanted you to hear this because I want you to hear the desperation of a person that's caught in the middle of a storm and does not know Hashem. This person was obviously, if you listen very closely, this person likely knew of Hashem and had many gods and goddesses. And this person was clinging on to whoever was going to help him in that moment. I think that we've all been in a situation where we are cast down. We're in a swamp, we're in a valley, we're desperate. I think the difference is in how we act, our actions, how we react to that situation. May it be His will that we will always cling to Hashem in all of our storms. May we never hold on to the little g's, the gods and the goddesses of this world. May we never hold on to the God of our neighbor or the God of somebody somewhere else. May we always cling to Hashem. When we don't remember, we risk breaking covenant, forgetting who our God is, and forgetting that we are dedicated to Him. And we start wondering after gods of this world. No matter how much pain this body's in, do not forget Hashem. I have a small parable that I want to talk about, and it deals with, I like parables, as you could tell. And the reason is because I've learned that when I speak to the little people in my family, they love the stories. But behind that story, there's a message. This is the parable of the 4 wives. Don't ask, and I won't repeat it. It was written, I've changed it a little. It was written by Haziyika Podar. And this is how it goes. There was a rich merchant who had 4 wives. He loved the 4th wife the most. He adorned her with rich robes and treating her to delicacy, caviar, the best of foods. He took great care of her and gave her nothing but the best. The merchant also loved his 3rd wife very much. He was very proud of her and always wanted to show her off to his friends. However, the merchant lived in great fear that she might run away with some other men. He loved too his 2nd wife. She was a very considerate person, always patient, and in fact, the merchant's confident. Whenever the merchant faced some problems, he always turned to his 2nd wife, and she would always help him out and tide him through the difficult times. Now, the merchant's 1st wife was a very loyal partner, and she had made great contributions in maintaining his wealth and his business, as well as taking care of the household. However, the merchant did not love his 1st wife. And although she loved him deeply, he hardly took notice of her. One day the merchant fell ill, and before long he knew that he was going to die soon. And he thought about his luxurious life and told himself, now I have 4 wives with me, but when I die, I'll be all alone. How lonely will it be? So He went and asked his fourth wife, I loved you the most. I endowed you with the finest of clothing and showered you with great care. Now that I'm dying, will you follow me and keep me company? No way, replied the fourth wife. No way. And she walked away. This cut the merchant right through the heart. It was like, ow, you know. So the sad merchant went to the third wife and said, I've loved you so much all my life. Now that I'm dying, will you follow me and keep me company? No, replied the third wife. Life is so good over here. I'm going to remarry the minute you die. The merchant's heart sank in his chest and he turned cold. So he went to his second wife and he said, I've always turned to you for help. And you've always helped me out. Now I need your help again. When I die, will you follow me and keep me company? I'm sorry, I can't help you out with this one, replied the second wife. At best, I could pay for your burial. The answer came like a bolt of thunder and the merchant was devastated. But then he heard a little voice and it said, I'll leave with you. I'll follow you no matter where you go. And the merchant looked up and there he saw his first wife. She was so skinny, almost like she suffered from malnutrition. Greatly grieved, the merchant said, I should have taken much better care of you while I could have. I'm going to tell you the meaning behind this parable. The fourth wife was his body. He took good care to wash it, dress it well, wear nice cologne, eat the best of caviar, eat in the best restaurants. But no matter how much you care for that body, it will go back to the ground and it will become dust. The third wife was his possessions and his wealth. Remember, he was always afraid he would run away with another man. That's temporary, we know this. The second wife, the one that was his confidant, are our friends, our families, our spouses. They could stand with us up until the grave. The first wife, the one that would follow him anywhere he would go, the one that he starved, the one that was malnourished. That's your soul. That's your soul. And we know that we're a soul, right? By this time we know we're a soul. This is a shell. This is a temporary outfit, right? That's the one thing that actually will always be there. And to keep our soul healthy, we must remember our relationship with Hashem. This is one of the reasons why we should remember, why we must remember Hashem. What better way to feed our souls than with the bread of life, than with reading his Torah? And our souls are always looking to reunite with him, so we must remember him. In Parashah Ki Tavo, we are called to remember. We remember Hashem. We remember our ancestors, where they were, and what Hashem did for them. And we could read it in Deuteronomy 26, 5-11. It says, my father was a wandering Aramean, and he went down to Egypt and lived there as an outsider, few in number. But there he became a great nation, mighty and numerous. The Egyptians treated us badly, afflicted us, and imposed hard labor on us. Then we cried out to Adonai, God of our fathers, and Adonai listened to our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. Then Adonai brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with great terror, with signs and wonders. And he brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So now look, I have brought the first of the fruits of the soil, and you have given me, Adonai. And then Hashem says, you are to set it down before Adonai your God and worship before Adonai your God. You will rejoice in all the good that Adonai your God has given to you and to your house, you, the Levite, the outsider in your midst. Rabbi Sachs, I don't know if you know of Rabbi Sachs. I really like to read his work. He writes many essays. His teaching of Ki Tavo pointed something that I want to share with you. The great eternal has dominion over time. Time doesn't restrict him. Time has no power, no hold over him. But when it comes to human understanding, he lives within time. So from generation to generation, remembering from generation to generation, this is the way that he does it, through the handing down of memory. This is how he speaks to us, and we are to remember him from generation to generation. That's why remembering is so important. And this is how, he says, Hashem says, this is how I am to be recalled. Ki Tavo teaches us that identity is not just a matter of who the parents were, right? We learned that. It's also a matter of what they remembered and what they handed down to us, to me and you. And our personal identity is shaped by individual memory, but group identity is a collective memory. This is why it's so important when we retell our stories, when we read Torah, when we share it. So how do we guard against forgetting and making our souls become malnourished? We guard against forgetting Hashem and starting our souls through continuous prayer. Whether you're reciting, we recite the Modeh, Modani upon arising from sleep, making him first. That's a first fruit. We're giving him that first second. We open our eyes and we tell him, Modeh ani lefanecha, melechai. We're telling him, thank you. We thank you. We make him first. We do morning prayers, shacharit, the midday prayers, mincha, ma'ariv, the evening prayers. After we eat and we're saturated, we bless Adonai for the good land and for the nourishment. That's the birchot chamazon, reciting the Shema. There's another way we do it, and you read it in Matthew 6:19-20. Don't lay up treasures for yourselves on this earth where moth and rust consume, and where thieves could break in and steal. But make a store for yourselves in the heaven where it will not be turned to dust, and where thieves do not come and take it away. Imitate Hashem, give to the orphan, the widow, to those who need, reflect Hashem's character, be doers of the word. If you read Ki Tavo, you will notice that he takes great care to mention the foreigner, the orphan, the widow. Hashem wants us to care for each other as a community. And he also wants us to look out for those who may not have a community, those who may not be wanted by others. When we are in covenant, we walk in his ways, and we must feed our souls with the bread of life, the Torah. By remembering who we are exclusively dedicated to and what he has done, is doing, and will continue to do, we keep that altar in our hearts burning for Hashem. When we memorialize historical events such as the Exodus, and we read at it in Pesach, when we sit on a Seder, when we guard the Shabbat, when we keep his appointed times, when we keep the covenant relationship alive and thriving throughout the generations. Rabbi Sachs said something that I thought was really valuable. He said, those who tell the story of their past have already begun to build their children's future. So this is why we must remember. And this is my takeaway for Ki Tavo. Once again, I want to encourage you to read it, see how it speaks to your life, because I'm sure it will speak a little differently. I thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.